Welcome to the Alchemy Experience podcast, where transformation isn't just talked about, it's lived. I'm Erin, and around here, we're turning breakdowns into breakthroughs, pain into power, and survival into serious thriving. Whether I'm flying solo or vibing with a badass guest, we dive into all the things on health, creating beautiful relationships, and building wealth. We're keeping it real, raw, and ridiculously empowering. It gets a little juicy, a little bit wild, and super inspiring. This isn't just another podcast, it's your permission slip to evolve loud, proud, and on purpose. Let's go light the world on fire. Welcome back, everyone, to the Alchemy Experience podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Candace, with me, who I met recently, but really excited to connect with you through social and see all the amazing work you are doing. Just a cool connection with you. So, a little bit about Candace, and then I'm going to pitch it to you to share your
Great.
for yourself. But you are a lawyer, an entrepreneur, transformational leader. Your work spans far and wide through finances, technology, human development, some spiritual stuff, I would even say, right? And
That's right.
you've practiced law for many years and have been the founder and leader of many companies, multiple companies at this
hmm
point, very mission driven, serving as a CEO in financial companies, one of the first nationally available, what is it, crowdfunding platforms, which like that, I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear a little bit more about that too for our listeners that are like, oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But you are the author of multiple books now, but the most recent and most probably near and dear to your heart is this polyagony book that you are about to launch. So I'm so excited to dive into that. You lead a current company that facilitates emotional intelligence, somatic healing. This is also like deep work to me, identity-based work, and personal and collective transformation. So I'm so excited to have you here. So much transformation that you've been through and to just sort of pour into our listeners today, but also with a twist on something
Yeah.
that some of us have not really talked about before. So I'm excited. But this intro doesn't even touch the surface. So why don't I pitch it to you so you can tell the peeps in my world who you are, what you do, and all the things.
Awesome. Well, Erin, thank you so much for having me. I'm such a big fan, and I'm a big believer in anyone who is doing the work. And I see you doing the work with your podcast. I see what your listeners are doing, and I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. I guess I'll just start off by saying I'm a mom first, and like that is always where I start. That's my North Star. I have a 6.5-year-old son who is the light of my life, and it is the reason for everything that I am up to in life. And and then from there I go into I'm an honest, open, loving leader. And so honest, I really appreciate rawness, authenticity. I don't like to sugarcoat things. I don't believe in frosted flakes. And open and loving. And so that's really the reason that I've written the book Polyagony is around what does an open, loving life look like? And if we're coloring outside the lines or there are no lines and we're living a life by design, what could that look like, not just in our families, but also in our romantic relationships? Yeah, as you mentioned, I've kind of like a duality in life. So I've always been corporate. So whether it's been a securities attorney or writing legislation or starting my own businesses or being an executive in large companies that have 66,000 employees, like I've kind of done all of that. I continue to do that. I have the corporate hat on. I'm a chief commercial officer for a payments company. And I have all of these side, I guess I would say passions. And I don't know which one's the side, right? But I'm really passionate about normalizing conversations around non-traditional families, and I'm very passionate about building a culture of generosity. And so whether that's through emotional intelligence trainings or healing courses or writing these books, these are my passions. I believe that there is a better way, and that we as humans can connect more authentically, more from a place of love and abundance. And so that's what I'm all about.
Amazing. I love this. It's interesting because as we first met and just kind of, got on a call, just chatting, getting to know
Yeah.
each other, just because we might not see things the same way, I'm a mom as well, a mom of boys. So,
Yeah.
I have a lot of boy moms, a lot of just moms that I work with in general, and high level
Hmm.
executive C-suite women, right? That are like
Yes.
moms first, but also we are so driven, partly because of them, but partly just because that's who we are. And
Yeah.
at the core, I love that you have this heart-centered leadership approach, even as a mom, even as a partner, and trying to dive in. And even though we don't necessarily live the same type of lifestyle, right? Like nobody really
Hmm.
does. We're all figuring
Yep.
out as we go. We can honor each other's love, right?
Hmm.
And desire to be loved and desire to
Yeah.
share that love. And so I think this is a really cool conversation just because people are going to learn today about you. They're going to learn potentially a whole different way of living.
Hmm.
And also they may be in this space as well, and it's going to serve them in a way to not feel isolated. And I think that's your point in writing this book
Yes.
is bringing light to this. I'm going to learn some things, and I'm excited just to kind of learn from you and hear what you have to say. So let's dive in a little bit more about the book, because I
Yeah.
think that's then going to help us sort of transition into, why this came about. But
Yeah.
what inspired you to write Polyagony? So share with the peeps the full title and, what really inspired this book.
Yeah, so the book is publishing in April, and so I'm very excited about that. You can get a pre-order copy at polyagony.com. The subtitle is actually something we're continuing to work on, but I will mention, like, the subtitles that we're working with are, from fuck up to family, or the art of making mistakes and coming back together. So there's something around that subtitle, but the reason for writing this, I have been polyamorous for 15 to 20 years, for most of my adult life. I've been married and together with my husband for 11 years, married for 10. And we have found a way to honor one another that allows me to continue to love freely and abundantly. And so and like we just believe in that as a family. And so what's interesting is that as I have a very large polyamorous community of friends and people from all over the world, and they're like, people always think that you just do this when you're single. This is something you just do when you're like not ready to settle down and have a family. But there are now a lot of families. In fact, 20% of Americans today identify as non-monogamous. So this is a fast-growing subculture with very few tools available. There's very little content. There's very little education or research on this topic. And so I think that's a disservice to a very fast-growing subculture that I am seeking to serve. My motivation, however, for writing this book was a little bit different. So, as I mentioned, I'm a mom first, and so my family and I ran an emotional intelligence leadership academy for many years. And two students of ours that were all adults, we graduated 1,000 adults through our program. They were married, and there was an extreme domestic violence situation case where they had three children under the age of 6. Those children were in a very unsafe environment, and so they had attorneys. The children had attorneys who reached out to us and said, "We'd really appreciate it if you would apply for custody." So my family applied for custody of these three kids and went to court for many months to try to give these kids a safe place to live. Ultimately, the judge ruled against us, largely because I am polyamorous, and to me, that was the wrong answer. These kids in this particular situation, it was determined that the kids would be better off in a foster home than with a family who already knew them, who could love them deeply, who could support their trauma that they were going through. Um, and who live in a very balanced environment. And so, to me, I said this is an opportunity for me to be an advocate because the next judge should not rule in this way. I just think this was the wrong answer. And so now I'm committed to normalizing a conversation around non-traditional family structures. My two moms, like GLBTQ. I have a sibling that we were a sperm donor to. There's all kinds of different family structures now that are much more non-traditional in nature and that should be embraced because there's still opportunities for children to thrive and grow and have a very happy, healthy life.
Mm. And that's where your legal stuff came into play, right? Is how can I look at this from a legal perspective, not just this emotional tie? Because obviously it was hard because you were emotionally tied to these kids and to the family and to
Yeah.
support them. And so that it's really hard to take that hat off. But when you can and say, okay, wait a minute, they're going to be going with a family they don't even know, that they don't have trust in, versus people that could really
And
support them.
potentially could be separated, right? So like that
Correct.
there were all of these factors that I don't think were and because I'm an attorney, I thought to myself the law is wrong here, and I've changed the law before. I've
Yeah.
actually gone and changed a federal law, and so it's like I know the law can be changed. I know that culture can shift, and because I know how to do this, I feel like it's my responsibility to take a leadership role.
Yeah. And what an honor and a privilege to be in that position, of responsibility, which, is a double-edged sword, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when we know more, we can do more, but then we've got to own that
Yes.
and push through. So, what a beautiful journey that you're on to be able to change something for somebody down the road that might be going through a similar situation. So, you're actively pursuing that at this point, and that's sort of what sparked this book as well. Almost like
Yes.
a guide, but also, I have not read it yet, but I'm excited for it to come out and for me to read it, get my hands
Yeah.
on it, and kind of see, because my understanding is it's not just for those that are in open relationships or different types of that. It's more for anybody that might be going through something in their relationship,
Yeah.
how to support them through it.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you brought that up. So my co-author of my first book that I wrote 3 years ago called Typhoon Honey, The Only Way Out is Through. That book was really meant on was focusing on your greatest challenges that lie in front of you, or your greatest opportunities for growth. So if you're afraid, run as fast as you can in that direction. And so my co-author from that book is a clinical psychologist named Chris Gorell. He was the first person to read my new book, Polyagony. And when he read it, he said, wait a minute. As I read this, I don't identify as polyamorous, but when I read your book, I think I am. I have a wife and 3 kids. And every time I had a child, I don't only have 100 units of love that has to be split among my 3 kids and wife. My love is abundant. And every time I had a new child, I loved them fully and completely. And so in that sense, I'm also polyamorous. And so that opened up, I think, a door for me of having just a more broad conversation on this topic. What we talk about is how do I define what my own boundaries are, what my why is, and what my values are as an individual. How do I share those values with a partner in a way that we are aligned and that we don't feel like we're steamrolling each other? How do we expand our family in a number of different directions such that we still have the specialness between the two of us as we expand our family? That could be children as well, right?
Yeah.
And then as we run into problems, as we run into breakdowns, jealousy, other things, how do we manage those breakdowns in a way that still holds the partnership sacred? So I think there's a lot that can be done with the topics here.
Yeah. So to stay in that sort of realm, what do you
Yeah.
think are the most common sort of struggles or downfalls or I guess just struggles that people
Yeah.
that are opening up their relationship more in a partner sense, not just with children, right?
Yes.
Obviously, we could talk all day as moms, right? Like,
Right.
I have two, and I remember having my second and saying, how am I going to love this one, as much or the same, or how does this work? And those that know me and know my family, my two children couldn't be more different. One is like light eyes, light hair. The other is dark hair, dark eye. Like just one looks
Hmm.
like me, one looks like my husband. Like completely night and day. One is very artistic and very musical and very analytical, and the other one is like a total athlete. Like I want to go hit somebody kind of kid. Like so,
Yeah.
very different humans. And if you're not a mom, it's hard to explain, but I
Hmm.
love them so deeply the same, but so incredibly differently because they are
Yes.
such different humans. And
Yes.
so we could talk about that, but if you switch over to the romantic partnership,
Hmm.
I think we can all say, yeah, there's been moments where we've had a connection with somebody on a deeper level than just a friendship, but we're in a committed marriage and being able to like have those boundaries and being able, right? Like I pride
Yeah.
myself in that. However, I also can appreciate how there's deep connection with people, whether it's romantic or friendship, right? Like I have very
Yeah.
deep connections with friends, some friends more than other friends,
Yes.
right? And so it's kind of holding on to that and like you said, having boundaries that make sense to you and your family, but share with us, maybe the struggles you may have had or that
Mhm.
and that you've seen most common in doing this work and opening up that relationship.
Yeah. So a couple things I'll just mention to you. When you talked about having deep connections with people, all of us have deep connections with people. Every human, if you've ever interacted with another human, likely has deep connections with other people. In fact, there was a woman that I did the Annapurna circuit in Nepal, which is a trekking through the Himalayas. And I did this years ago when I was like 30 years old. And I met this woman, Mita, and she and I trekked together in the Himalayas for a few days. And she said, whenever you meet someone, and she was teaching me about her religion, and she was like, whenever I meet someone and I feel like I have a really deep connection with them, I know that I've met them in a previous life
Mm.
and I'm meeting them again because there's a lesson to be learned.
Yeah.
And so in that day, she shared some really like heartfelt connections with me, like lessons of life with me. And so I feel that way with anytime I meet a human, I'm like, is there a lesson here? And whenever I connect, I'm like, there's a lesson. Like, let's go explore that together. And so taking that a step further, if you were to be in a relationship as I am, where the boundaries don't stop you from having a connection that could be physical or romantic in nature, like that for me allows me to deepen the connections I have with other people, with and still be in integrity with the relationship that I have with my husband and all of that. But when you ask like what are the pitfalls, what are the things like if I'm one in five of Americans who are now looking to potentially open up my relationship, and that's a fast growing number, what are some things I should be thinking about? The first is getting real clear on your why. Like,
Mhm.
why do I want to do this? And is it because my partner wants it? If that's the case, it's not going to succeed. So that's
Mhm.
the first pitfall is that like if I do something just because my partner wants to do it. I'll give different examples that aren't around polyamory. I'm moving to a new city because my partner wants to live there. I got a new job. Okay, how many times have you heard somebody say, "Well, I moved here for a boyfriend, and that didn't work out, and now I'm stuck in this city," right? So a lot of times we make decisions to please a partner, and so if just as in any other big life decision, if you're making this decision to please a partner, it's not going to work. And so you got to really check in with your own why. Is this something that is aligned with my personal values? And if not, it will not likely be successful.
Mhm.
The second, and you mentioned this, Erin, is boundaries.
Mhm.
So like, am I super clear on what my boundaries are with my primary partner? And so you are very clear on what your boundaries are, and so am I. Our boundaries are different, but we've discussed them, and we're very clear with our partners about what our boundaries are. And over the years, it'd be like, yep, nope, that's a boundary for me, and you know it sometimes by backing into it by saying, oh, now that's a boundary for me. It's the same thing in polyamory, being super clear. And I always encourage people to start at the lowest common denominator. So if you're a couple and you're saying one person's saying, I want to go out and like do all the things, and the other person's saying, I just want to like just like check into like flirting online for a little bit before we actually like do anything with anyone, or even like talk about our fantasies first for a year or whatever that might be. Start there. Start at that lowest common denominator, what the most conservative person feels comfortable with, because your primary relationship matters most.
Mhm.
And so like if you like I call it the primacy of the relationship. So if you can hold the primacy of your relationship, one, that makes your primary partner feel still special. But two, it helps them to know that I'm safe. Like if I get uncomfortable, we can always come back. We can always come to a place that we're both comfortable with. And so I see a lot of mistakes around that where one person just wants to run really fast and be very wild, and the other partner's just not ready for that, and their nervous system needs time to regulate. So those are a couple of the like the starter mistakes, and there are some once you get into the dating space.
Yeah. So interesting and so different, yet I can appreciate that, right? I can appreciate
Yeah.
because even with anything, going from being, a couple, a married couple to then integrating children, right? Our whole
Hmm.
life changed.
Hmm.
And as you're saying, kind of backed yourself into some things, there were some situations that did happen for us and like okay, I need you to be around a little bit more.
Yes.
As a mom, I'm taking on this new, my body's changed and I'm nursing this child and I'm home and I'm on maternity leave and now we have a second child and I'm on, trying to raise a toddler while still, and so
Yeah.
being able to have the boundaries of like, what's our life looking like now? And
Yep.
I think what it comes down to, I think that what we both are saying is communication
Yes.
and
Yes.
learning how to communicate at each new season of your relationship.
Yeah, and one of the things I spend quite a bit of time on is check-ins, the importance of having consistent check-ins, whether that's weekly, monthly. Like I have weekly check-ins with my husband and any of my committed partners. We all have weekly check-ins, and so that way we're like, how are we doing? Is there anything we need from each other this week? Is there anything that needs to shift? And we also say like, how are we doing professionally, financially, intimacy-wise? Like with the kids, like is there anything that's feeling super crunchy for us that we need to work through? So check-ins are super important. The other thing is having agreements that you write down, you
Mm.
know, and this could be like we talked about, even if you're not polyamorous, like how often do I go on work trips and how much time is at home is needed with the kids. What do we need from each other around time, money, communication, and every quarter giving yourself an opportunity for that to change, for it to shift a little bit. Like, okay, we've gotten to a new baseline. I feel more comfortable. You can start traveling for work again, or whatever that might be, right? And so having an opportunity to renegotiate those agreements on some kind of a consistent basis.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Communication, I think, is just the fundamental principle of being in any type of relationship, even friendships. You know,
Yeah.
I've had some really struggles with friendships of having to set new boundaries and having to,
Hmm.
kind of back out of some friendships and not be as involved just because in it as a new season as we evolve and sort of transform into our newer self, right? Like
Yeah.
it might not be aligned anymore. So I can imagine that that can get kind of sticky and tough when you're in multiple um, romantic relationships if one thing isn't feeling right anymore.
Yep. So there's a couple of categories there.
Yeah,
So one is around secure attachment, and the other is around jealousy and insecurities. So let's talk about both. So
love it.
secure attachment. So when you are in a primary relationship, like with your husband, you took years to build secure attachment with them. So to know you're my ride or die. If there was a catastrophe, I know you'd be the person I'd call. You know, like if I ended up in jail or if I ended up in the hospital, you'd be my phone call. And that takes time. That takes time to build that kind of trust and that kind of commitment with each other. So if you open up your relationship, building secure attachment is work. It takes effort. In fact, a lot of people are like, I'm too lazy. Like I don't want to have secure attachment with multiple people. But
Yeah.
you do. You have secure attachment with your kids, right? So you have secure attachment with your husband and with your kids. And it took time building secure attachment with your kids. And so in fact, all of us as adults, if we study the topic of secure attachment, it's all how did I attach to my parents when I was a child? So now do I get anxious when I'm around another like intimate relationship? Am I avoidant? That all goes back to how we related with our parents. And so the way that I relate with my husband is different than the way that I relate with another partner. And it takes time. And so I'm very securely attached with my husband. We've been together 11 years. I have a partner that, we've been together for a few months. And so we're a little anxious right now. We're like, oh, if we don't hear from each other, are they still interested? So like there's the building of that. The second thing that you mentioned was around jealousy and insecurity. And so jealousy and insecurity is real. It is a thing. And it's also real whether you open up your relationship or not. So we always kind of deal with hey, is my partner looking at someone and checking somebody out? Like we've always had that kind of crunchy feeling. When you open relate, there is definitely an opportunity for jealousy to take over at times. And there are a lot of mistakes in my book that I focus on. I have 100 vignettes based on interviews with 100 different families that are all polyamorous or non-monogamous in some nature or were at some point in time. And there was a lot around jealousy. And I call it "Don't yuck my yum" in the book, but like when my jealousy impacts your relationship with someone else. And so if I have jealousy, that's my work. that's work I got to do with myself. So I get to check in with my therapist. I get to go back to like, where did that come from? Is this tied to abandonment issues with my father? Whatever that is, right? That's my work to do. And oftentimes, when we're opening up relationships, we think, no, no, this is your work, husband, because I'm feeling jealous. Now you have to deal with it. That's yucking his yum. And so it's like, okay, well, is this really his work or is this mine? And so I think there's a need to get clear on who's holding whose work.
Yeah. In sort of the work I do in reference to that, I call it belief systems, which like very
Hmm.
similar, right? Like it's tied back to what are those belief systems that were created in that first, 5 to 7 years of life.
Yep.
And we have to unroot those at some point in our life if we're going to be able to successfully be grounded in ourselves. And so calling it like other people's BS, right? So
Yes.
oftentimes and in the work I do in my therapeutic and even in my coaching, making sure I'm not owning somebody else's BS, right? That is something
Hmm.
they have to own, but I can hold space for it. And I think that's hard for people that don't necessarily do the regulation work, the somatic work, that aren't in this world that we are in,
Hmm.
that they don't quite always see that, right? Or quite understand that there is a difference between owning somebody else's BS and just holding space for it, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's what it sounds like, being able to hold space for somebody else's jealousy, not take it on, but communicate through it and say,
Hmm.
what can I do to support you through moving through that?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
very similar stuff. And I love that you touched on that because I think no matter what relationship, friendship, romantic, multiple partners, whatever it is, there is going to be an element of, I don't always want to call it jealousy or envy, but like this, oh, I missed out on hanging out with them, or I missed out on this
Hmm.
piece with them, or I feel like they got to, even with friends, oh, they got to go do this and I couldn't go, so there's that
Yeah.
like fear of
There's a
missing out.
FOMO. FOMO.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, the
Yeah. I
FOMO.
have a
Yeah.
whole chapter. I have a whole chapter on FOMO.
Yeah. And so that, that can happen romantic or not. And so I think my husband just went on a trip and it was due to him needing to be with one of his very close friends whose parent passed away and wanted to be there.
Hmm.
But I wasn't able to go because I had so much going on and being with the kids. And man, it was like, oh, I wish I could have been there just in so many ways to support him,
Yeah.
to support both of them, to be there, but also like, there's a little jealousy there, but it's like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that, without being resentful and nasty to him of like, you get to go to 80-degree weather and I got to be stuck here in
Yes.
-7, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it's being able to sort of move through that no matter what type of relationship. So what a cool way to just process it and think about it in different.
Hmm.
Yeah.
There's also, there's a difference between jealousy and insecurity. So jealousy is like, okay, someone else is getting attention that I want. Insecurity is I'm not worthy. So there's something about this person that now my partner doesn't find it in me, right? Like, does my partner not love me anymore? And
Mhm.
so that insecurity is also, this is not for the weak of heart or the weak of stomach. Like this type of living requires emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
It requires that you continue to do the work, that you do your own emotional alchemy, right? That you continue to process your dysregulations, and that you be open about that. Like, oh, I'm feeling dysregulated right now. This is not your work. This is mine, but I'm recognizing I need this. It requires nonviolent communication. Like, you have to have some tools in order to be able to navigate any time where where your attention and your love is splintered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Splintered. I like that. Attention and love is splintered. That's a great way to put
Mhm.
it. So
Mhm.
beautiful. What what advice would you give? I know you touched on this a little bit, but what advice would you give to maybe couples that are looking to enter into this type of
Yeah.
relationship or transition into?
The first piece of advice I would give is to find yourself a poly-informed therapist. And there are many, and there are resources in polyagony.com. You can go to polyagony.com for a whole directory as well as a glossary of the terms that are used here. But is to find yourself a poly-informed therapist because they specifically have been trained in attachment theory and and things that can support you through the processing that you'll need to go through. The second thing I'd say is move slowly. Like, however it might feel slow, move slower. Like, you got a whole lifetime here to work with, and I think one of the big mistakes I see often is that someone cheats and then they think, oh, well, this is the answer. Like I cheated and so now we're going to open up for marriage. And it's like, well, no, first there's some repair that needs to be done just to rebuild trust. I do not recommend opening up your marriage, by the way, if you've cheated, because there are some other issues that need to be solved for first, and repair that needs to happen first before you could ever consider successfully opening things up. So you want to open things up from a place of strength, from a place of security, from a place of like, we are solid. And then that's when, seeking out the tools, the therapist, and the conversation topics. Like, in this book, we have a number of templates for how do we talk about forming agreements? How do we talk about our hopes and fears? How do we process that and turn that into something that, how do we go on our first date? And how do we share about like how much information we want to know? Like how do we do this as parents? And so like if you're parents and you have children and now you're thinking about opening up your relationship, that enters a whole new level of complexity. So how do we balance time with our kids? How do we talk about this with our kids? Like, do we talk about this with our kids? Do our kids even want to know about our sex life? Probably not. So why would they want to know about something else? And how do we negotiate boundaries with them? So there's quite a few templates for having conversations that you would want to take a look at first.
Beautiful. And, feel free to answer as little or as much as you want to the
Sure.
question, but I think it's one that's on my mind, so I'm sure it's on those that are going to be listening here.
hmm
But how did you guys start off your relationship that way, or was this something that through time you decided? And then how were you able to decide about having kids and how that looked and
Yeah.
how you're able to support your child on this whole process?
Yeah, so I'll give the answer for myself, and then I'll talk about the other families I interviewed because there are many variations on this. So for myself, I have been poly for 15, 20 years. So I was polyamorous before meeting my partner, my primary partner, and so we've always been open. There's a chapter I write in the book though called the love bubble, and so there was definitely a love bubble where you got like where there was primacy and like where it was just us for quite some time so that we could build that trust and we could build that secure attachment. I'm a big believer in a love bubble, by the way. Even if you are polyamorous, like build that love bubble. um, and then we chose to have children after we were already open. So that's not 90% of the people who are in this world. Many of them are just opening up later in life after having kids.
Mhm.
And so the thing to think about is, one, is this a lifestyle choice? We're trying it on for a while. It's an experiment. We'll see how it feels. And then, we may or may not stick with it. If that's the case, I wouldn't recommend sharing it with your kids. It's like if you try skiing for a while, it's like, well, I tried skiing for 3 years, didn't work out. I'm not a skier anymore because that's a lot for your child to process,
Yeah.
the going back and forth. So if it's an identity, so if you identify as LGBTQP, I always add P at the end of LGBTQ or GLBTQ. If you're like, no, I am polyamorous, this is a really important piece of who I am, this is part of my identity, then that is something that likely should be shared with your children and family because it's a part of your identity. And so to not share it would be inauthentic with the people that you love the most. And then you think about, okay, how do I do this in an age appropriate way? How do I share information that, mommy and daddy both love you very much? Mommy and daddy always come back. Mommy and daddy always come home. There are books about this. And then as they get older, introducing age appropriate topics. So I think there's different ways to do it. And I think that it requires quite a bit of preparation in advance so that you feel super grounded before you have those conversations.
Yeah. Amazing. And you found that most people, in what you're saying, kind of transition into this lifestyle.
Yeah, and a lot of people stay closeted for a very long time because they just don't know. They don't know if this is something that they want for the long term. And I'm a big believer in that. Like move slowly. And I'm someone now who has come out very publicly as a bisexual, poly, queer woman, and I've kind of taken the hits that come with that from family members and like my employer knows. So obviously I've written a book, so it's not a secret.
Mhm.
And so for me, I'm in a very different place. And even with my son, I looked for LGBTQ books when he was young, Pride Parade books of going to the parade with mommy, and just to introduce to him the concepts that there are different ways that families can look. And so now he'll be like, which ones are you? And so like I'm like, oh, well, mommy is a Q. And and like we talk about this. And it's in a way that feels natural to him. And then it's a way that it holds back quite a bit of information until he's actually ready for it.
Yeah. I think that's the key with kids, right? It's not just the age appropriateness, but
Hmm.
developmentally within them and understanding your kiddo, right? And so I think, like I said, my kids are very different. They are different ages, but I think my oldest was well more advanced and at different levels than my youngest, right? At different things and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's kind of knowing how to support them in sharing what is really necessary, I guess.
Yep.
Because,
Yep.
like to your point, you don't want to be sharing all this and then it drastically changes, and now this person is no longer in your life, and now there's this like, you know, detachment, and now we're entering this anxious attachment style because now we're worried about who's coming
Hmm.
into the life. So,
And I do think it's incredibly important to constantly reinforce the safety of the units, whatever that unit is, right? So if there, then there are many thruples, for instance, who have children in the home, but just constantly reinforcing to the kids, we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. You are safe. You are loved. Like this unit is secure. That's something that is incredibly important. And so if you're coming at this like at the verge of divorce, not a good idea, because that there's already a threat to the unit. And so like if the unit is strong, then you can continuously reinforce the strength of that unit to the children.
amazing. What an
Yeah.
interesting conversation, and so much more we could dive into. I'm sure there are many stories from those that
Hmm.
you've gathered of research and discussion
Hmm.
that you've shared in this book. So, for those of you that are interested in just learning more about it, this isn't necessarily a lifestyle of yours that you're choosing or wanting to choose, but I think it's important that we, especially if you're in the line of work that I am in, social work and therapy, in the helping and healing professions, even in the legal side of things, like really
Hmm.
understanding that there are different relationships going on. There are different types of family values. There are different types of lifestyles, and just learning about that, I think, is important, and being able to just understand it from a place of love and acceptance, which is great. So, thank you for sharing all this. This is so cool.
Thanks so much for Erin for the work that you do and for continuously being open to these different perspectives. I think this is part of the work we're meant to do.
Yeah, I really honestly agree. Again, like we talked about before, like, this isn't the lifestyle I've chosen or want to, but I think it's interesting to just have honest and open conversations because, I might meet somebody that I'm working with in the therapeutic setting that is going through that,
Hmm.
and they're not sure what to do. I have a new resource that I can share,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
speaking of that, how can people find you if they
Yep.
are looking to work with you in any sort of capacity or get your book? How can people find you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so the best way is polyagony.com. You'll be able to find information not only about the book, but the templates I mentioned during this conversation. I also offer coaching and retreats, and all of that is also available at polyagony.com.
Perfect. And if somebody wants to just connect with you directly for whatever reason, would that be
Hmm.
there's a resource to connect with you directly on?
There is all of my social links are on polyagony.com as well. Yes.
Perfect. One-stop shop. I love it.
Yes. Thank
So
you so much,
amazing.
Erin.
Yes. And I always like to end with this type of question, just because I think it always throws people off, but I love it. If there was one nugget of information or one word, one phrase that you would want to leave folks with today that's on your heart, what would that be?
I would leave them with my contract with myself as I am an honest, open, loving leader and mother. And so, my invitation for your listeners is what's your contract with yourself? What is it that you remind yourself? What's your North Star? Mine is honesty, openness, and love every day.
I love it. So beautiful. Well, thank you for this conversation. I know that this is going to just give some people some different perspective and maybe open their hearts and minds to listening to other people in the world and what they have going on, and maybe take a beat and not be so quick to judge or quick to want to inform or quick to, give advice, and more so listen and absorb and digest.
Yes.
So
Thank you so much, Erin.
appreciate your time.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Alchemy Experience. If this episode lit something up inside you, go ahead and share it with someone who's ready to rise too. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with me online on all social media at the Alchemy Experience. Because transformation loves company, and together we all rise. And hey, don't just survive this week. Thrive like you frickin' mean it. Let's go let it up. Talk soon.